Officer, this is a mistake. I'm innocent.
Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent.
I want to see the evidence.
You'll see at the station. Let's go. I'll get the door. Ma'am, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent.
This is a mistake. I didn't do anything.
We'll sort it out at the station. Walk this way.
Please, you have to believe me.
Watch your head. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent.
This is a mistake. I didn't do anything.
We have a warrant. You're under arrest.
A warrant for what?
We'll explain at the station. Let's go.
The piercing wail of a police siren slashed through the tranquil Georgia afternoon, a sound that always makes your heart jump. For one woman driving a dark blue Lexus down a quiet, sun-dappled street, that sound marked the beginning of a nightmare. She was a decorated combat veteran, a full colonel in the United States Army on her way to visit her ailing mother. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All the man in the rearview mirror saw was a black woman in a car he thought was too expensive for her. He had no idea he was not just pulling over a citizen, he was pulling over a commander, and he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. This is not just a story about a traffic stop. It is a story about power, prejudice, and the steel-willed resolve of a woman who refused to be broken. Colonel Brianna Thorpe loved the hushed stillness of Pinewood, Georgia. It was a world away from the dust of Kandahar, the strategic tension of the Pentagon, or the bustling order of a military base in North Carolina. Pinewood was slow, sweet, and steeped in the humid air of the Deep South. It was home. More importantly, it was where her mother, Eleanor, lived, and Eleanor's health had been failing. The doctors used gentle words like decline and age-related complications, but Brianna, trained to assess threats and realities without emotion, knew it meant she was running out of time. She had taken a leave, trading her crisp Army service uniform for simple civilian clothes, a pair of comfortable jeans, and a gray V-neck sweater. Her Lexus, a practical indulgence she had bought herself after her last promotion, hummed along the familiar streets. She turned off the main highway onto Elmwood Drive, a street lined with ancient oak trees whose branches formed a protective canopy overhead. Her mother's small, tidy house was just a few blocks away. Brianna was mentally running through a checklist. Pick up Eleanor's prescription from the pharmacy. Check the pantry to see if she needed more low-sodium broth. And, most importantly, just sit with her on the porch and listen to her stories. For a woman who managed the logistics for thousands of soldiers, these simple tasks were a welcome change of pace, a mission of love. As she approached the four-way stop at the intersection of Elmwood and Pine, she did what she had done thousands of times since she first got her driver's license in this very town. She came to a full and complete stop. She looked left, then right, then left again. The street was empty. She eased her foot off the brake and began to accelerate through the intersection. That is when she saw it. A flicker of red and blue in her rearview mirror. A local police cruiser, a Ford Explorer that had been parked obscurely behind a thicket of overgrown azalea bushes, pulled out and accelerated rapidly. The siren let out a short, sharp yelp, and the lights blazed to life. Brianna's heart did not pound. Her breath did not catch. Years in the military, including combat tours overseas, had trained her to suppress the initial jolt of adrenaline and replace it with cold, methodical analysis. She scanned for a safe place to pull over away from the intersection. She signaled her turn indicator, clicking rhythmically, and guided the Lexus to the right-hand shoulder. Coming to a smooth stop under the shade of a large oak, she placed the car in park, engaged the emergency brake, and rolled down all four windows. She turned off the engine and placed her hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions, just as she had been taught. She knew the procedure. She knew the risks. Even here in her quiet hometown, she was a black woman, and that simple fact she knew could change the entire dynamic of the encounter. She waited. The cruiser door opened, and a man emerged. He was tall and broad, with a sun-reddened neck and a paunch that strained against the fabric of his uniform shirt. He wore mirrored sunglasses, making it impossible to read his eyes. He approached the passenger side of the car, his hand resting casually on the butt of his holstered sidearm. His partner, a much younger officer, hung back by the cruiser, observing. Brianna watched him in her side mirror. He was not walking. He was swaggering. It was a walk she recognized as a display of dominance meant to intimidate before a single word was spoken. He circled around the back of her Lexus, his eyes scanning the interior, his expression unreadable behind the reflective lenses. Finally, he appeared at her driver's side window, his large frame blocking the afternoon sun. "Ma'am," he said, the word dripping with a syrupy, condescending drawl. "Do you know why I pulled you over today?" Brianna kept her eyes forward, her hands firmly on the wheel. "No, officer, I do not. You rolled right through that stop sign back there. Barely even slowed down." Brianna's training kept her voice steady, devoid of emotion. "Officer, with all due respect, I made a full and complete stop. I checked all directions before proceeding." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That is not what I saw. License and registration." He did not say, "Please." "Of course," Brianna replied. She slowly, deliberately lowered her right hand to the glove compartment, narrating her actions. "Officer, I am reaching into my glove compartment to retrieve my registration and proof of insurance." She retrieved the documents and handed them to him. Then she did the same for her purse, which sat on the passenger seat. "I am now reaching into my purse for my wallet to get my driver's license." She handed him the license. He took the documents and studied her license, his lips curling into a slight sneer as he read her name. "Brianna Thorpe." He glanced from the photo to her face and back again. Then he looked at the registration for the new Lexus. "This is a mighty nice car, Brianna," he said, his tone shifting from procedural to personal. "Mighty expensive." "It is a reliable vehicle, officer," she said, her voice still a flat, respectful monotone. He leaned in closer, his arm resting on her open window frame, invading her personal space. She could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You from around here? This address is local. I grew up in Pinewood. I am here visiting my mother." "Uh-huh," he grunted, unconvinced. He tapped the registration with a thick finger. "Car is registered to an address near a base in North Carolina. That is a long way from home." "I am stationed there," Brianna said simply. The officer, whose name tag she could now read as L. Carver, smirked. "Stationed? What are you, a secretary on the base? A cook?" The condescension was a physical thing, an oppressive weight in the small car. Every instinct honed by years of commanding respect and giving orders screamed at her to put this man in his place. But a different kind of training, the kind learned through lived experience, held her in check. She knew that for a black woman in her position, a show of authority would be interpreted as aggression. Calmness and compliance were her only armor. "Something like that," she replied evenly. Officer Carver seemed disappointed by her lack of reaction. He was clearly looking for a confrontation, a reason to escalate. He pushed her military ID, which she kept behind her driver's license, into view with his thumb. "What is this?" he asked, pulling it out. He read it. "Colonel Brianna Thorpe, United States Army." He let out a loud, disbelieving laugh. "A colonel? You are telling me you are a full bird colonel?" "Yes, officer, I am." He handed the documents back to his young partner, Officer Bryce Madden, who had cautiously approached. "Madden, run these and run this military ID. It is probably a fake. I have seen them online for $20. He turned his full attention back to Brianna, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were small, pale blue, and filled with a dismissive, arrogant light. "So, Colonel," he said, drawing the word out as if it were a joke, "let us try this again. Where are you really headed in such a hurry?" The storm had arrived, and Colonel Brianna Thorpe knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was not about a stop sign. The air in the car grew thick and heavy. The rhythmic clicking of her turn signal, which she had forgotten to switch off, seemed to mock the tense silence. Officer Carver stared at her, his expression a mixture of contempt and expectation. He was waiting for her to break, to get angry, to give him the excuse he so desperately wanted. Brianna met his gaze, her own eyes unblinking. "Officer, as I stated, I'm on my way to visit my mother. She lives on Elmwood Drive. You got anything in this car I should know about?" Carver pressed, ignoring her answer. His eyes scanned the pristine interior, the empty passenger seat, the small gym bag on the back floor. "Weapons, drugs, large amounts of cash?" "No, officer. I have my personal belongings and some groceries for my mother in the trunk. You will not find anything illegal in my vehicle. You mind if I take a look?" It was not a question. It was a demand wrapped in the guise of a request. Brianna knew her rights. She knew she could refuse the search, but she also knew that refusing would be seen as an admission of guilt in this man's eyes. It would escalate the situation from a hostile traffic stop to a full-blown confrontation. She had to de-escalate. "Officer, I do not consent to a search of my private property," she said, her voice firm but respectful. "However, I have nothing to hide. Are you detaining me or am I free to go?" The use of the phrase "do not consent" seemed to flip a switch in Carver's mind. His face, already flushed from the heat, darkened with anger. You do not consent. What are you hiding, Brianna? You think using big lawyer words is going to impress me? From behind them, Officer Bryce Madden's voice crackled over the radio. Then he called out, Lance, the license is valid, registration is clean, and dispatch is confirming the military ID. She is legit. Colonel, U.S. Army, decorated. And any reasonable officer would have ended the encounter right there. A mistaken stop, an apology, and a have a nice day. But Officer Lance Carver was not a reasonable man. The confirmation of her rank was not a reason to back down. It was an affront to his authority. To him, a black woman could not possibly hold such a high rank legitimately. It was a challenge. Carver sneered, waving a dismissive hand at his partner without even looking at him. Dispatch does not know anything. Could be a stolen ID. You are being detained now. Step out of the car. Colonel Thorpe took a slow, deliberate breath. This was a critical moment. Officer, for what reason am I being asked to exit my vehicle? For my safety, Carver barked, his voice rising. I do not know who you are or what you have in here. Now get out of the car slowly. Her military training took over. In a tactical situation, you comply with the immediate threat to maintain control and look for an opening. The side of a road in Georgia was now a tactical situation. Okay, officer, she said, her voice calm. She unbuckled her seatbelt. I am stepping out of the vehicle. She opened the door and stood up, her movements measured and precise. She was 5'9", lean and athletic, and she stood with a ramrod straight posture that radiated a quiet authority. She stood by her open car door, hands visible, waiting for his next command. Carver seemed to grow even more agitated by her composure. He circled her, looking her up and down as if she were a piece of contraband. Turn around. Put your hands on the roof of the car. A cold dread, something she had not felt since a near miss with an IED outside of Fallujah, settled in her stomach. Officer Carver, you are making a serious mistake, she said, her voice dangerously low. The only mistake here is you thinking you can talk back to me. On the car now, he roared. She complied. She turned and placed her hands flat on the hot roof of her Lexus. The metal was warm from the sun. She heard the click of his radio as he spoke into it. Subject is non-compliant, becoming hostile. Lie. A blatant, venomous lie broadcast for the record. She heard the jingle of metal, and then the cold, sharp bite of handcuffs on her right wrist, then her left. They were ratcheted on far too tightly, digging into her skin. The sheer humiliation of it was a physical blow. A United States Army colonel, a woman who had commanded battalions, being cuffed on the side of the road in her own hometown. Officer Bryce Madden, the younger officer, now looked genuinely alarmed. Lance, what are you doing? We do not have cause for this. She refused to search, and she is being belligerent. That is cause enough. Carver spat back, his attention still fixed on Brianna. He roughly patted her down, his hands lingering in a way that was meant to be degrading. What is in the bag in the back seat? My gym clothes, officer. He was not listening. He opened the back door and pulled out her bag, unzipping it and dumping the contents onto the passenger seat. A pair of running shoes, leggings, a sports top, and a water bottle tumbled out. Nothing. His frustration was palpable. He had been so sure he would find something, anything, to validate his ugly assumptions. He slammed the back door shut. You think you are clever, do not you? He hissed, his face inches from hers. You think you are somebody special? For the first time, Brianna Thorpe allowed a flicker of the steel that lay beneath her calm exterior to show. She turned her head slightly to look him in the eye. Officer Carver, she said, her voice as hard and cold as chipped flint. I am somebody special, and you are going to spend the rest of your life regretting this day. That is not a threat. It is a statement of fact. Come on. His face contorted in rage. That is it. You are under arrest. For what crime? She demanded. Resisting arrest. Obstruction of justice. Take your pick. He grabbed her by the arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and began marching her toward his cruiser. Officer Bryce Madden intercepted them, his face pale. Lance, stop. This is wrong. We cannot do this. Let us just write the ticket and go. Stay out of this, Madden. Carver shoved his partner back. She wants to play tough. We will show her tough. Get in the car. He forced Colonel Thorpe into the back of the cruiser. The plastic seat was hard and uncomfortable. The space cramped. The smell of cheap air freshener and old sweat filled her nostrils. He slammed the door, sealing her in the cage. As she sat there, the world a distorted view through the wire mesh, she watched Carver and Madden. Madden was pleading with his partner, gesturing wildly. Carver was shaking his head, his jaw set in stubborn defiance. He had gone too far to back down now. He had manufactured a reality where he was the hero taking a dangerous criminal off the streets, and he was going to see it through to the end. Brianna closed her eyes for a brief moment. The anger, hot and sharp, was there. But beneath it was a resolve that had been forged in fire. He thought he was caging an animal. He had no idea he had just caged a tiger. And he had handed her the key. The Pinewood Police Department was a small, squat brick building that smelled of burnt coffee and disinfectant. Officer Carver shoved Colonel Thorpe through the back entrance with unnecessary force, parading her past a bored-looking dispatcher as if she were a prize catch. Officer Bryce Madden trailed behind them, his face a mask of misery and conflict. Carver processed her with vindictive glee. He took her fingerprints, the ink smearing under his rough handling. He took a mugshot, ordering her to stop looking so proud as she stared directly into the camera, her expression one of cold fury rather than shame. He logged her personal effects, her wallet, her keys, her phone. "You get one phone call," he said, sliding a grimy landline phone across the booking desk. "Better make it a good one. Maybe a lawyer. You are going to need one." Brianna looked at the phone, then back at Carver. This was the moment, the turning point. A lawyer would be the logical choice, but a local lawyer would get tangled in the small-town politics that clearly protected men like Carver. She needed a different kind of authority. She needed to go up the chain of command. She picked up the receiver and dialed a 10-digit number from memory. It was a number she had memorized years ago, a direct line she hoped she would never have to use for personal reasons. It rang twice. A crisp, professional voice answered. "This is Colonel Brianna Thorpe," she said, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the stale air of the police station. "I need to speak with the General. It is a personal emergency. Authorization code Sierra Tango 9er. There was a brief pause on the other end. The dispatcher, who had been idly scrolling on her computer, looked up with mild interest. Carver rolled his eyes, assuming it was some kind of bluff. The secretary's voice returned, now laced with urgency. "Colonel, patching you through immediately." A moment later, a deep, commanding voice came on the line. It was a voice accustomed to moving armies. "Brianna, what is wrong? Are you all right?" General Clayton Reeves was a 4-star general, the commanding officer of the U.S. Army Forces Command. He was, in essence, one of the most powerful men in the entire military. He had been Brianna's mentor since her days as a young captain. He was a man who saw her not as a black woman, but as a brilliant officer, a soldier's soldier. "Clayton, I have a situation," Brianna said, maintaining her military decorum despite the circumstances. "I am currently in custody at the Pinewood Police Department in Pinewood, Georgia." Carver, who was listening in, let out a snort of laughter. "Clayton, she is on a first-name basis with a general," he muttered to Madden. General Reeves's voice lost all its warmth, replaced by ice. "In custody for what?" "I was pulled over for allegedly rolling through a stop sign." "The arresting officer is Officer Lance Carver. I've been charged with resisting arrest and obstruction of justice. I'm currently in handcuffs at the booking desk." The silence on the other end of the line was more terrifying than any shouting could have been. It was the sound of a powerful mind processing information, of gears of immense power beginning to turn. "Officer Lance Carver." The general repeated the name, now etched in his memory. "Brianna, are you physically unharmed?" "I am, sir. My dignity has been assaulted, but I am not injured." "Good. Stay calm. Do not say another word to them. Do not answer any of their questions. I am handling this. You will be out of there shortly." "And Brianna." "Yes, General. I'm so sorry this is happening to you." "I know, sir. Thank you." She hung up the phone. She had said all she needed to say. She turned and sat on the hard bench, bolted to the wall, her back straight, her cuffed hands resting in her lap. Carver swaggered over. "So, is your general sending a platoon to rescue you?" he mocked. Brianna simply looked at him. She said nothing. Her silence was more unnerving than any threat could have been. It was the silence of absolute certainty, the silence of a commander who has just called in an airstrike and is waiting for the ordnance to hit its target. Soon, the first ripple appeared. The police chief, a man named Raymond Foley, burst out of his office. Foley was a portly man in his late 50s with a perpetually worried expression. Today, that expression was one of sheer panic. "Carver, my office now!" he yelled, his eyes wide. He did not even glance at Brianna. Carver looked confused, his bravado momentarily faltering. "Chief, I was just finishing booking this." "I said now!" Foley roared. Carver scurried into the chief's office. The door slammed shut, but the shouting was easily audible. At first, it was just Foley's muffled yelling. Then Carver's voice joined in, high-pitched and defensive. The dispatcher was now sitting bolt upright, staring at the closed door. Officer Bryce Madden was trying to make himself as small as possible in a corner of the room. He looked at Brianna with an expression that was a mixture of fear and, strangely, awe. The front door of the station opened. A man in a razor-sharp business suit walked in. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with an air of absolute, unshakable confidence. He walked directly to the booking desk. "I am Captain Elias Grant from the U.S. Army Judge Advocate General's Corps," he announced, his voice filling the room. "I am here to represent my client, Colonel Brianna Thorpe." "Where is she?" The dispatcher numbly pointed a trembling finger toward Brianna. Captain Grant walked over to her. He was a young, clean-cut man, but his eyes were those of a seasoned litigator. He gave a slight, respectful nod. "Colonel, Captain Grant, General Reeves sent me. Are you all right?" "I am now, Captain," she replied. Grant's eyes fell to the tight handcuffs on her wrists. His jaw tightened. He turned to the dispatcher. "Get the key. Release my client immediately." Just then, the chief's door flew open. Chief Foley emerged, his face pale and slick with sweat. Officer Carver followed, his face ashen. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Foley saw Captain Grant, and his entire body seemed to shrink. "There has been misunderstanding," he stammered. Captain Grant fixed him with a stare that could freeze fire. "Chief Foley, a misunderstanding is when you get the wrong order at a drive-thru. Arresting a decorated United States Army colonel on fabricated charges, lying on an official report, and illegally detaining her is not a misunderstanding. It is a federal crime, specifically a violation of U.S. Code Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law." He let the words hang in the air. "Now," he continued, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level, "you have exactly 10 seconds to take those cuffs off my client before I call the U.S. Attorney's Office and have FBI agents crawling so far into your department's business, you will be finding them in your coffee pot for the next 10 years. Your 10 seconds start now." Chief Foley fumbled for the handcuff key, his hands shaking so violently he could barely fit it into the lock. The cuffs sprang open. Brianna Thorpe slowly brought her hands around, rubbing her chafed wrists. She stood up. The tables had not just turned, they had been flipped over, smashed into pieces, and set on fire. Officer Lance Carver was no longer the man in charge. He was just a small man in a small room who had picked a fight with the United States Army, and the Army had answered. For a moment, a stunned silence enveloped the small police station. Chief Foley stood with the handcuff key dangling from his trembling fingers. Officer Carver looked as though he had been punched in the gut, his face a sickly shade of gray. He was beginning to grasp the magnitude of his error, the sheer catastrophic miscalculation he had made. Colonel Thorpe, now free, stood tall. The relief was immense, but it was overshadowed by a cold, controlled anger. She looked from Foley to Carver, her gaze lingering on the man who had humiliated her. He could not meet her eyes. Captain Grant, the JAG lawyer, stepped forward, his briefcase clicking open on the booking desk. "First," he stated, "all charges against Colonel Thorpe are to be dropped and expunged from your records immediately. I want a signed confirmation of that before I leave this building." Chief Foley nodded frantically. "Yes, of course, right away. It was all a mistake." "Son," Grant continued, his voice like ice, "I want copies of everything. The dashcam footage from both vehicles, Officer Carver's body cam footage, the official incident report he filed, and the booking records. Do not edit, delete, or alter a single frame or word. My office has already filed a preservation request with the state police and the district attorney. Any evidence that goes missing will be treated as felony obstruction of justice." Foley swallowed hard. "We will gather that for you." "You will not gather it. You will hand it over to me right now," Grant corrected. "Officer Madden," he said, turning to the younger officer who was still trying to blend into the wall. "You were present. I suggest you think very carefully about your statement. Your career may depend on your honesty." Madden looked at Carver, then at the chief, then at the formidable Captain Grant. The choice was clear. His loyalty to his corrupt partner evaporated in the face of self-preservation. "Yes, sir, I will tell you exactly what happened." Carver shot him a look of pure venom, a silent threat that Madden ignored. The thin blue line had just broken. While Foley and the dispatcher scrambled to comply with Grant's demands, Colonel Thorpe finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "Chief Foley," she began. He flinched as if he had been struck. "Yes, ma'am." "Colonel," she said, gesturing with her chin toward Carver, "is this officer a reflection of the standard you set for the Pinewood Police Department?" Foley opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked helpless, a man completely out of his depth. "Because what happened today was not a mistake," she continued. "It was a choice. Officer Carver chose to pull me over without cause. He chose to escalate the situation. He chose to lie on his report. He chose to abuse his authority. These were all conscious decisions. So, I ask you again, is this the kind of man you want carrying a badge and a gun in your town?" Carver finally found his voice, a pathetic, whining version of his earlier bravado. "I was just doing my job. She was being difficult. I was calm. I was compliant," Colonel Thorpe countered, her voice cutting him off. "The only difficulty I presented, officer, was that I did not fit your prejudiced caricature of who I should be. You saw my skin and my car, and you saw a crime. You refused to see a citizen, and when you saw my rank, you refused to see a soldier. You saw only a challenge to your fragile ego." Every word was a perfectly aimed shot, dismantling his pathetic excuses. The charges were formally dropped. The digital files were being transferred to a secure military server. Colonel Thorpe's personal effects were returned to her. As she and Grant prepared to leave, Chief Foley made one last desperate attempt at damage control. "Colonel Thorpe, on behalf of the department, I want to offer my sincerest apologies. I hope we can put this unfortunate incident behind us." Brianna stopped at the door and turned to face him. She let the silence stretch for a long, uncomfortable moment before she spoke. "Chief," she said, "let me be perfectly clear. We will not be putting this behind us. What you call an incident, I call a symptom of a sickness in your department. And the only way to cure a sickness is to expose it to the light. Officer Carver did not operate in a vacuum. He operated in a culture that you, as chief, have allowed to fester. You are as responsible for his actions as he is." She looked past him to Carver, who is now slumped in a chair, a broken man. "You wanted to teach me a lesson today, officer, and you have. You have taught me that my fight for this country is not just in foreign lands. It is right here on streets like this. You have reminded me what I fight for. And I promise you, this fight is just beginning." With that, she turned and walked out of the police station, Captain Grant at her side. She did not look back. She stepped out into the late afternoon sun, which no longer felt warm and welcoming, but harsh and exposing. The quiet streets of her hometown now seemed to hold a sinister secret. As they walked to her car, Captain Grant spoke. "Colonel General Reeves has already been in contact with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. He wants to know how you wish to proceed." Brianna stopped beside her Lexus. She ran a hand over the roof where she had been forced to place her hands, the metal now cool to the touch. The humiliation, the anger, the violation, it all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard resolve. "This is not about me anymore, Captain," she said. "This is about every person who has been treated this way, but did not have a 4-star general on speed dial. We are not just filing a complaint. We are filing a federal lawsuit against Officer Lance Carver, against Chief Raymond Foley, and against the entire Pinewood Police Department. We are going to change this town." And the system had tried to protect itself by sweeping its ugliness under the rug. But Colonel Thorpe was about to prove that she was a more powerful system entirely. She was not just a soldier, she was a force of nature, and the storm she was about to unleash on Pinewood would be one for the history books. The lawsuit landed like a bomb. Colonel Brianna Thorpe versus Officer Lance Carver, Chief Raymond Foley, and the city of Pinewood. The filing, prepared by a team of the Army's best legal minds and co-signed by a powerhouse civilian civil rights firm, was a masterclass in legal firepower. It was not a plea for a quiet settlement. It was a declaration of war. The documents methodically detailed every moment of the traffic stop. They included a sworn affidavit from Colonel Thorpe, expert testimony on police procedure, and most damningly, a full transcript of the body cam and dash cam footage. The footage was undeniable. It showed a calm, compliant woman being systematically harassed, lied about, and arrested by an officer on a power trip. It captured Carver's sneering questions, his dismissal of her credentials, and his fabricated radio call about her being hostile. It also captured Officer Bryce Madden's clear discomfort and his attempts to de-escalate, which were brutally shut down by Carver. The news broke on a local Atlanta news station that got the tip first, likely from a source connected to the military. The headline was explosive. The story complete with Colonel Thorpe's official service photo showing her in full uniform, her chest adorned with ribbons including the Bronze Star and the Legion of Merit, went viral. It was on every national news network, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. For once, they were all telling the same story. The contrast was just too stark, too compelling. A heroic black woman who had served her country with distinction being treated like a criminal in a small southern town. The phones at the Pinewood City Hall and Police Department began to ring off the hook. First it was reporters, then it was angry citizens from across the country, then it was state representatives and U.S. senators. The office of Georgia's governor issued a statement promising a full and thorough investigation by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The city of Pinewood was under siege. For Chief Raymond Foley, the world fell apart in a matter of hours. The good old boy network that had protected him for years crumbled under the weight of national scrutiny. The mayor, a man Foley played golf with every Thursday, was now screening his calls. The city council called an emergency session, and the words "vote of no confidence" were being whispered in the halls. Foley was placed on administrative leave, a prelude to a forced resignation he knew was inevitable. His career was over. For Officer Lance Carver, the consequences were far more direct and terrifying. The GBI investigation moved with lightning speed, armed with the unedited video footage and a key witness in the now very cooperative officer Bryce Madden, who gave a full confession of Carver's long history of similar pretextual stops. The state had an airtight case, but the state charges were the least of his worries. The Department of Justice, spurred on by General Reeves's outrage, had launched its own federal investigation. 2 stone-faced FBI agents arrested Lance Carver at his home. The charges were not for resisting arrest. The charges were federal perjury for lying in an official police report and the career killer, a violation of U.S. Code Title 18, Section 242, the very statute Captain Grant had quoted in the station. It was the law used to prosecute police officers who willfully deprive individuals of their constitutional rights. Lance Carver was not just facing the loss of his job, he was facing years in federal prison. The town itself was reeling. Protesters, both local and from out of state, began to gather on the steps of City Hall, holding signs with Colonel Thorpe's picture and demanding police reform. National civil rights leaders descended on Pinewood, holding press conferences and community meetings. The ugly secret of the town's policing was now its defining feature in the national conversation. The idyllic image of a quiet southern town was shattered, replaced by the reality of systemic prejudice. Through it all, Colonel Brianna Thorpe remained composed and dignified. She refused all interview requests, allowing her legal team to speak for her. She did not want this to be about celebrity or personal vengeance. She wanted it to be about justice and change. She returned to her duties at the base in North Carolina, to the life of order and purpose she had built. Her soldiers and fellow officers greeted her with a new level of respect and awe. They had always known she was a strong leader, but now they saw the depth of her courage. She had faced down an enemy on home soil, armed with nothing but her integrity and her resolve. The legal battle raged on. The city of Pinewood, facing bankruptcy from the lawsuit and its ruined reputation, quickly moved to settle. Their insurance carrier, seeing the mountain of evidence against them, advised them to cut their losses. The settlement was historic for a case of this kind. A multi-million-dollar figure was agreed upon, but that was not Colonel Thorpe's most important demand. The terms of the settlement were non-negotiable and aimed at systemic change. 1. The immediate termination of Officer Lance Carver. 2. The resignation of Police Chief Raymond Foley. 3. The implementation of a permanent federal oversight program for the Pinewood Police Department, managed by the Department of Justice. 4. Mandatory continuous de-escalation, anti-bias, and constitutional rights training for every single officer on the force, conducted by an independent third party approved by Thorpe's legal team. 5. Funding for a new community outreach program to rebuild trust between the police and the citizens they were sworn to protect. It was a total surrender. Colonel Thorpe had not just won her case. She had forced the entire power structure of the town to bend to the principles of justice. As for the money, Brianna accepted none of it for herself. The entire sum was placed into a trust managed by a reputable foundation. Half was donated to the National Civil Rights Museum, and the other half was used to establish the Eleanor Thorpe Scholarship Fund in her mother's name to help underprivileged students from her hometown go to college. The reckoning was complete. The karma had been delivered not by fate, but by a woman who refused to be a victim and instead chose to be a warrior. The conviction of Lance Carver was a quiet affair. Stripped of his badge and uniform, he was just a scared, defeated man in an ill-fitting suit. He pleaded guilty to the federal charges to avoid a longer sentence, his arrogance replaced by a hollowed-out fear. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in federal prison. In his statement, the judge made a point to mention that the victim's extraordinary composure and knowledge of her rights had likely saved her from a much worse fate. A chilling acknowledgement of what could have happened. Chief Raymond Foley quietly retired, disappearing from public life in disgrace. The town of Pinewood began the long, painful process of rebuilding its police department from the ground up under the watchful eye of the DOJ. Officer Bryce Madden, who had testified against Carver, remained on the force, a constant reminder to his colleagues of the cost of silence. He was a changed man, humbled and acutely aware of the power he wielded. But the story of Colonel Brianna Thorpe did not end with a courtroom victory or a settlement. Its true impact was measured in the ripples it sent out across the country. The case became a staple in law school classrooms and police academies. The Thorpe Protocol, as some trainers informally called it, became a case study in how to handle oneself during a high-tension traffic stop. Civil rights advocates used the body cam footage as a powerful training tool, showing precisely how an officer's bias can create a crime when none exists. For the military, the incident was a wake-up call. The Pentagon initiated a comprehensive review of how it supports service members, particularly minorities, who face discrimination in their civilian lives. General Reeves spearheaded a new program providing immediate access to JAG legal services for any soldier reporting a credible case of civil rights violation by law enforcement. A direct line of support was established, ensuring that no soldier would have to face such a situation alone, whether they were a colonel or a private first class. A young man in a wheelchair, a former Marine who had lost both his legs in an IED blast, called out to her. "General Thorpe," he said, his voice hesitant. "Yes, son," she replied, walking over to him. "I know who you are. I mean, not just as a general. I saw your story on the news. The thing with that cop?" "I see," she said, her expression softening. The young Marine looked down at his lap for a moment, then met her eyes. "Ma'am, I grew up in a town a lot like that one, and I joined the Corps to get away, to be part of something better, something honorable. When I got hurt, I was so angry. I felt like the country I sacrificed for did not always see me, just another black man." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "But then I saw you, the way you handled yourself, the way you fought back, not with anger, but with dignity, with power. You did not just fight for yourself. It felt like you were fighting for all of us who serve. You reminded me that honor is not something someone else can take from you." Tears welled in the young man's eyes. "So, I wanted to say thank you, General. Thank you for your service, not just in uniform, but on that day, on that road." Brianna Thorpe reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. In that moment, all the pain, humiliation, and frustration of that day washed away, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. The lawsuit, the media storm, the reforms, they were all important. But this connection with a fellow soldier was the true measure of her victory. She had endured a trial by fire on American soil and emerged not scarred, but forged anew. Her legacy would not be defined by the actions of a racist cop, but by her own unwavering response. She was a leader, a warrior, and a patriot in the truest sense of the word, a woman who served her country in more ways than one, leaving it a better place than she found it. Her story became a permanent part of the American fabric, a powerful reminder that true strength is not about the authority you were given, but the integrity you refuse to surrender. The story of Colonel Brianna Thorpe is a stark and powerful reminder that the fight for justice does not always take place on a battlefield. Sometimes it happens on a quiet suburban street during a routine traffic stop that is anything but routine. It shows how one person's courage, composure, and unwavering belief in their own worth can challenge a broken system and win. Colonel Thorpe's ordeal was a crucible, testing her resolve in ways even combat had not. But from that fire, she forged not vengeance, but meaningful, lasting change. Her story resonates because it is a testament to the power of integrity against prejudice and a demonstration that true karma is not a mystical force, but the direct result of determined, courageous human action. In the end, Colonel Brianna Thorpe's ordeal on that quiet Georgia street teaches us one of the most powerful lessons life can offer. True strength is never loud, flashy, or born from anger. It rises quietly from within, rooted in dignity, self-respect, and unshakable integrity. When the world tries to shrink you, when prejudice blinds those who should protect you, and when every instinct screams to fight fire with fire, the greatest victory comes from standing tall in your truth without losing your humanity. Brianna did not just survive that humiliating moment. She transformed it into something far greater than herself. She showed us that real power lies in composure under pressure, in knowing your worth even when others refuse to see it, and in turning personal pain into lasting change for everyone who comes after you. Her story reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear. It's refusing to let fear, hatred, or injustice define who you are. No matter what you face in uniform or out of it, never let anyone convince you that your skin, your background, or your quiet confidence makes you less. You are somebody special. Hold on to that truth with everything you have, because your dignity is the one thing no one can ever take unless you surrender it. If this story touched something deep inside you, if it stirred your heart and reminded you of your own quiet battles, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what does integrity mean to you when the world feels unfair? Which part of Brianna's journey moved you the most? Your stories matter here, and if you want more powerful real-life lessons like this one, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change how you see yourself and the world. Thank you for being part of this community. We grow stronger together.